Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm here on Friday, December 16th at 2 p.m. Pacific time in lovely San Diego, talking about the energetic shift into Sagittarius that we are having, that we just sort of had, and 2023 is right around the corner as well. You can see this is a chart of the day here, December 16th, 2022. You see the sun has just gone into Sagittarius. This was, earlier today. And, Mercury, Venus are both there. Again, this happens every month. I did in my December forecast, I talked about the big shift in the middle of the month. So here we are. And we're also, again, as it says, moving toward 2023. 2023 is right around the corner. And you can see here, this is a 2023 personal forecast. As you can see, the first part of that forecast for next year has this Mercury retrograde is in Sagittarius until January 17th of next year. In fact, Mercury starts going retrograde on the 29th, just, in a couple weeks. And then also in the middle of January, Saturn then goes into Aquarius. So Saturn is going to move from this place in Capricorn. He's going to move into Aquarius. That's going to happen here in the middle of in the middle of January next year. Now, of course, as we're right on the cusp of this 2023, all of these shifts, we have a lot going on here. And so you want to be aware of that also. So you get the picture. What's your 2023 going to be like? Is it going to be hornets and alligators and electrocution, or puppies and cuddles and smiles? No, seriously. It is a great year ahead. We have a lot of big shifts, and you can check that out. I dropped a link in the comments section for people watching live, my 2023 VedicAstrology.com, and you can get the forecast based on your sign or all 12. Big important shifts coming. So as I said, we have this, this 2023 is right around the corner, and you want to be aware of what's happening because, again, middle of January is about a month away. Saturn will then have moved into Aquarius. We have a Mercury retrograde cycle going, and then we have all of these other shifts happening next year in early, when we get into April. We have April 20th, we have a solar eclipse, we have Mercury going retrograde, but then we also have Jupiter going into Aries. We have Jupiter Rahu cycle, all this in the spring of next year. So again, be prepared for 2023. A lot of people get these forecasts every year because they are very transformative and very informative. So where we're at now with this shift that just happened, moving on from the Scorpio energy, much of December has had that kind of Scorpio sort of kind of trying to ride out the stress and fear and worry and, difficulty. But again, we're kind of moving on with the sun moving into Sagittarius. It's where we then kind of move into the next stage, whereas Scorpio is that sort of emotional strength and resilience where we're trying to, strengthen our emotional responses to things. Sagittarius is where we then look for a higher purpose, a higher cause, higher answer. We feel more hopeful, more inspired. And again, Mercury and Venus have already been there, but with the sun now moving into Sagittarius, we have this real kind of empowerment. And you see this first section of Sagittarius is Mula Nakshatra. Mula is the roots, where we go down into the roots of things and pull out by the roots those things that are not taking us where we want to go. We need to really pull out by the roots the bad teachings and the false beliefs and hopes that we have. And again, Sagittarius comes after Scorpio, because Scorpio is where we can be quite triggered by our fears, by our struggles, by those things that we're paranoid about, like we're worried that, oh my God, what's going to happen? And, all these things are going to, sort of take over, and we get disconnected from the truth. We start to live in that world where we expect things to be difficult and where we're easily manipulated. This is the thing about the Scorpio energy too, when it spirals downward, is we can be very easily manipulated by others who want to exploit our fears. But again, there's so much of that in the world now, where people are being exploited based on their fears, their paranoia, and things like that. This shows a lack of good teaching. When we don't really understand the truth and we don't have a good teaching, then we can believe anything, and our suspicions can be used against us, because we all know that something is lacking here in the world through our body and mind and our emotions. But what's the real answer? What's the truth? Well, it's there needs to be a purity about our teachings, a purity, which is what Sagittarius brings. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is a sattvic planet, which is a planet of purity, which means pure teachings are really what are needed now and what are needed in our life. We stop believing in pure teachings. We don't even think there are pure teachers or teachings around, because we're so used to being exploited. But that doesn't mean those pure teachings don't exist. We were looking for that purity from our parents, for example. When we were young and innocent, we thought our parents had the answers. We thought, okay, I'll openly trust you. And then we realized, oh, they didn't have the answers either. They were flawed. They had emotional problems. They were stupid like everybody else, with all due respect, like we are too. Like, nobody really has the answer. And then we become kind of cynical. And again, we can become like paranoid. Again, those are sort of the negative qualities of Scorpio. The powerful qualities are we go into ourselves and we try to find an answer, and we develop a lot of resilience. But the problem is that we can also just expect and project that dark paranoia onto everything and be suspicious of everything. And at that point, we don't even recognize a good teaching anymore, because we've been so corrupted and we're coming from such a point of distrust. So the key is to reinstill good teachings, pure teachings that aren't based on faith. They're not based on hope and faith. They're based on practice. This is why the Indian teachings are so transformative, because they're not beliefs. They're not religion. They're practices. No one should tell you to just believe them. In fact, the best spiritual paths are practices. They're not beliefs at all. The religious part of Indian metaphysics, of Indian religion, you might say, are the practices, not the beliefs. The beliefs are just the sort of cultural structure into which the practices become relevant. Just like with Buddhism, there's really not even a religion around it. It's just practices. Buddhism isn't really a religion, it's a practice. You meditate, you remember yourself, there's reflection. That's what Buddha brought. He brought the absence of worship. Now, again, there's always going to be things that crop up around that, but in essence, Indian teachings are the same, even though Hinduism, the religion that sort of was cobbled together around all the practices is very developed. It's actually not really even a formal religion. It's a collection of many practices that people get together and do, and then all of the deities and all of the mantras and all that, they're not prayers that are done as worship, although there's that component. There's the devotion, which is called bhakti, but the bhakti or the devotion is not a way to subservient or to make you subservient in blind faith. They're they're actually scientific. The mantras, for example, that you say vibrate the chakras. It's all a scientific process. If you say the mantras and you do these practices, you have the experience of your divinity. So the experience through the practices is the point. It is the point. In fact, you don't have to believe anything in Indian practice. But you do the practice. Yoga is the point. It's not a religion. Meditation is a practice. It's not a religion. You could do the practice without the religion and get the same benefit. But what the religion part of it does, the devotion part, or what's called bhakti, again, I keep qualifying it like that because bhakti is different than worship. Because worship is very much about like blind faith. Bhakti is devotion. For example, a mother and her child. Does the mother worship the child? No, she doesn't worship the child. She's devoted to the child. There's devotion. You're devoted to the thing. Devotion is different than worship. Western religions are based on worship, which is in many ways conditioned upon the fact that you'll never know the truth. You'll never know yourself. You'll never know because there's God and there's you. You're not Jesus. You're not God. Who do you think you are? You think you're Jesus? Throw him in an asylum. But that's not Indian thinking at all. Indian thinking would be saying, yes, you're Jesus, you're God. Not at some delusional idea, but that because God is just consciousness. And if you want to experience that, sit this way and breathe. It's a practice. And then once you do the practice, then you become devoted to yourself, your own teachings, the path, and the gurus who have walked the path before you. Like I talk about my guru Amma and other saints. They're not saints because I worship them blindly or I believe in them as some kind of religion. There's devotion and gratitude and a prayerful mindset because they've walked the path. How do I know? Because I've sat in front of them and I see the difference in what they do and what I do. And if you've never sat in front of beings like this or done this kind of thing, yet you still have a condemnation about people who are devoted, then you should check your experience. Then you should check it at the door because you don't have the same experience as someone who has done the practices, sat in front of the being, and now you're devoted, just like someone who doesn't have a child, bringing all their judgment on the people who do have children, for example. So worship and bhakti are very different things. And I'm talking about worship and bhakti because they're very much related to Jupiter. And Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. And this is the big shift that really just happened. This big shift into this Jupiterian way of seeing things. From the Scorpio quality of like trying to survive psychologically and emotionally, because that's really what Scorpio is. It's that last section of the zodiac where after Libra, and we have this illusion of relationships and other people, and the world is going to make me happy. Scorpio is like, no, it's not. And I have no control over anything here. I don't know what's going on. And so I feel stuck. I don't have an answer. And I know I'm going to lose everything. And I know this body and this ego is going to die. But what comes next? Now, again, that's a catalyst for a lot of creativity if it leads to great teachings, especially pure teachings. It might just lead someone to worship and religion, and that's fine too. But it's that paranoia of Scorpio leads to something, leads to some sort of teaching and some sort of following. And again, I don't like to just say belief system because it's not necessarily a belief system. Like I don't believe in the things that underpin my spiritual practice. I don't believe in yoga. I don't believe in astrology. I don't believe in these gurus. They're my practices. I do them. Just like you don't believe in food. You eat it and it does something. It's a thing you do. You don't believe in brushing your teeth. You do it. And you do it because you know when you don't do it, you might have the teeth fall out of your head. So that's the difference between a practice and a belief. And Western religions and Western culture is very much driven by dogma and belief. If you don't think it is, you should really examine your life and how much of your trajectory and your sense of purpose is just driven by a bunch of things you believe but you don't understand. Stevie Wonder said, when you believe in things you don't understand, you're going to suffer. Superstition ain't the way. You might think, oh, I'm not superstitious. I understand stuff. Do you? Do you really understand the things you believe? Do you really understand, again, whether it's something like Christianity or even things like, again, all of the things people believe now, especially all of the influencers you follow and all the stuff you hear them say about capitalism and what's really going on with this and that and all the teachings that are coming at you that you believe that are giving your life some purpose. Do you really know? Do you really understand all of that? I mean, really to the point where you get it? If it is, what did you believe 6 months ago? Was it different? What did you believe a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? I'll tell you the truth. Mine haven't changed in 20 years, 30 years since I started meditating because it's not driven by belief. It's driven by experience. We're driven by experience. What you experience is then what you do, what you're acting upon. It's not a religion. It's not a belief. So the thing is that I'm talking about this intentionally because this shift into Sagittarius is this fire sign. It's where we act upon the things that we believe, so to speak. We act upon the things. We don't just believe them. It's just a bunch of data and information. Oh yeah, this, I believe this. I believe in this. I believe in this. So what? A lot of people believe a lot of things. And again, it's better to have good beliefs than, quote, bad beliefs. It's better to believe all of this elevated stuff. But you notice this is what makes for like hypocrisy, religious hypocrisy. And by the way, Sagittarius is the sign of the hypocrisy as well. How many people believe all this stuff and then what do? What do you see them do? People are more hateful in the name of religion than anything. People can be more hateful in the name of their beliefs than anything else because they have the armor and the shield of their beliefs, and they believe they're doing it for God or doing it for some higher purpose. They don't know any of this stuff. There's no embedded knowledge. And when I say know and knowledge, I mean what you've lived. Because you only know that which you've lived. Think about your life. The only thing you really know, I mean really know, is what you've experienced, what you've lived. By the way, this is the astrological first house. You have a lot of beliefs about a whole lot of stuff, but what you really know, and the only thing you know, is what you have actually lived. And that includes things like your state of consciousness and your spirituality and meditation and all of that. You can have a lot of ideas about that, but your real level of consciousness and awareness and spiritual development is based on what you've lived, not what you've thought about or read, and mainly what you've experienced internally through meditation and spiritual practice. That's what's real. And if that's very shallow, then all of these beliefs are just going to be kind of careening around, but they're not going to be anchored into that core essence of what you've lived. That's why you'll see people have all these beliefs, but what they really know and who they really are is what they've lived. So, for example, people who believe all of this stuff, let's say about religion and all this, but underneath it all, they're still like racists, or they're still hateful because that's what they've lived. That's actually what they've lived. Now they have all these beliefs on top, oh, this, that, but then underneath it all, what they've really lived, that's not what they've lived. It's just some window dressing. What they've really lived is, oh, you know, these people are like that. These people are like that. And that's what they've experienced. They haven't experienced a transformation around those things. They haven't experienced a transformation where And again, one of the things that changes those kinds of beliefs are they actually might meet, let's say, again, and it's happened a lot, particularly over the last 50, 60 years, when people were raised in the 50s and 60s, they never even met a black person. They did literally think all black people, let's say, were this way or that way. What changed their beliefs? They actually met somebody who was like that. And they're like, wow, they're not that way at all. I completely just believed all this stuff that wasn't true. Or let's say now about like with gay people, with gay, LGBTQ, there are people who've never been around people like that. What changes it? What often changes people's real beliefs is they actually meet somebody like that. They have a daughter or a son who is that way. Now they're like, oh, I had all these beliefs. I had no idea. And the thing that changes it is their experience with that thing, and that changes their beliefs. Before that, it was just some disconnected belief. They believed all this stuff. They didn't really understand it. And again, I'm not trying to be critical, but that's what hypocrisy is. I'm not trying to be mean about it, but that's what it is. This is why, again, some of the most hypocritical people are the ones with the most beliefs, because they're disconnected from the experience. That's why if you really want to make spiritual progress, making spiritual progress means you have to do spiritual practice, not just believe things. So again, I'm making the point very strong because we're very much in that place now where a lot of these things are hitting hard, because we not only have this Sagittarius cycle that's coming, and Mercury, Venus have been there for a couple weeks, but now the sun is set up there. Again, like I said, Saturn is about to leave Capricorn, where he's been since 2020, and we've picked up a lot of these beliefs that are based on our fears, things we can't control, things we don't understand. It started right when COVID started. That's when Saturn moved into Capricorn. And within a month, he's going to be gone. So all of these fearful, weird beliefs that many people have picked up, we're starting to move past them. We're starting to move beyond them. It looks like the world is moving on from a lot of this stuff. You can see it. And you can also see the people who really benefited and profited from everybody being fearful and triggered. You see how they don't want to let go of it. I notice it myself right now a lot, where particularly, I'll just say real quick, like with the last election we had, was a clear referendum on a certain quality of the conservative party here, where all of these candidates who were denied elections and stuff, they all lost. They were trying to kind of drag people back into that, oh, remember the good old days when we were denying elections and doing this? Remember how great that was and how fired up we are? And the public was like, yeah, we're done with that. And they don't want to let it go. They're still like, no, come on back to the good old days when we were all fearful and paranoid and we were able to. I'm using that as an example, but there are a lot of examples of where you can see that stranglehold kind of slipping, because the next cycle is Saturn moving into Aquarius, right? The next cycle, like I said here, is Saturn moving into Aquarius, January 17th of next year. We also, still have Jupiter up here in Pisces. And so again, there's just a lot of this big shifting going on, and it's a great time to really understand how these things work. And I have some things that are going on next at the beginning of next year as well. On January 7th and 8th, I'm teaching a class on karma, the moon, and consciousness in Vedic astrology. In this class, you're going to learn about your heart and mind and the heart and mind of others too, how your karma and actions come through the mind, seeing beyond the illusion of your mind and emotions to the meta you, that transcendent place of stillness and peace. I'm going to be teaching that with Elise de Villiers. It's a great way to learn. It's a very enjoyable format, a lively conversation. Elevate emotion into devotion. We'll analyze the moon yogas. We'll look at sati sati, moon nakshatras, lunar cycles, and a whole lot more. Again, it's going to be taught live Saturday and Sunday, January 7th and 8th, 2023. But if you can't make it live, you still get the recordings to listen to forever. In fact, you don't even have to wait to start learning. There's a great bonus class available now called Classical Moon Yogas course. This is more than 6 hours of classes that I taught several years ago. The people who came to that course paid $125. You get this as a bonus. And it's where I analyze the moon yogas concept, the planets before the moon, join the moon, and after the moon. This is right from the classical text, Brihat Parashara Horasastra. You get that now. That bonus itself is worth the price of the course. The course itself is only $47, which is an incredibly reduced price from what would be $97, not including the bonus class that you get right now. So the three biggest psychological factors to analyze are the moon yogas, the sign and house parameters, and the nakshatra factors. But these are the static ones that are fixed at birth. We also have to look at the dashas, the transits. Would it be worth $47 to learn all of that? If so, just click here and register for the Moon Yogas course. You'll get right away, and then get the live class January 7th and 8th, and have the recordings for the rest of your life to listen to. So if that's interesting to you, please check it out. It's a great time to really study these aspects of the heart and consciousness, because that's really what meditation is doing. It's helping to see beyond all of the emotional triggering. We're very emotional, and we don't sink deeper into that devotional space, into that space of bhakti. And again, bhakti doesn't mean some elevated emotional state. It's actually the state that arises in the heart when there's gratitude for the wisdom that we've gained. And again, this is also very much related to Jupiter. Jupiter is also very connected to bhakti, because his real nature as guru is the joy of the wisdom, the expansiveness and the joy that comes from learning the truth and practicing the truth. And of course, we feel that as a deep, as an emotion, because we feel everything as an emotion. But as I said before, emotion is different than devotion, because devotion is something that's enduring, like a parent is devoted to their child, which means they're not going to give up on it simply because it's difficult. Whereas emotions are a whole other thing. We get emotional and we like break connection. We do all kinds of stuff when we're emotional. When we're devotional, we're anchored in the heart, and our life really revolves around what we're devoted to. You need to ask yourself this question: what are you devoted to? And again, we can talk, like I was mentioning earlier, about people who, have these beliefs. A lot of them are difficult beliefs, even things like racism and bigotry and horrible things. But to the people who believe these things, their whole life revolves around it. They're devoted to that. That's their devotional practice. They're devoted to these ideas that, whites are the supreme race. This guy who came into our contest, Nick Fuentes, I think was his name. This guy is as fired up about his beliefs as someone who has good beliefs. He's just as devoted to them. Now, again, it's a twisted devotion, and I'll flat out say it, right? But that gives his life a sense of meaning and purpose. And Sagittarius is that sign of belief, and how those beliefs are taking you somewhere in your life. Because if we hung out and just stayed in the negative qualities of Scorpio, which is where we can be, we can just hang out in the difficult quality of Scorpio and just feel paranoid and stuck and terrified of those things that we can't control. And if we do, we just won't be able to live, frankly. The hope and inspiration of Sagittarius comes next to give our life meaning and purpose. So we better know what it is that we're devoted to, because we're all devoted to something. Maybe, again, it's our family, it's our work, it's, our spiritual growth. Maybe it's, a very typical one in the Western world is capitalism, a capitalistic, materialistic, trying to be happy. And we see how these goals fail. This is often the goal that fails in the West, is capitalism and materialism. This external, well, the meaning of my life is to make money and be happy and do all of this. And it actually ultimately fails and leads to that kind of crisis of Scorpio, where it's like, well, because that whole dream revolves around other people. Like I said, that's very much, that winds up in the kind of Libra. I'll find someone and be happy, and that's the purpose of my life. And that fails because it's not the purpose of our life. The purpose of our life is to know the self, know our true nature, find something higher to believe in beyond this body-mind structure, which is going to end. And so this is why now these are big issues coming up now with this shift into the Sagittarius energy, into this Sagittarius cycle that just sort of formally finished with, not finished, but it's like very much established now with the sun going into Sagittarius for the next 30 days. Again, this first section is Mula, where we pull out by the roots a lot of those difficult teachings and those false beliefs. So again, those of you who are listening, and now is the time to really examine what you believe. And I mean really examine what you believe about, again, not just religion or whatever, but religion is like, political figures, influencers, things, people you're following, things you believe in, things that give you some hope about life. Obviously, if you're watching this, some of what you believe and that some of what gives you hope is this astrology, right? But again, even in that context, I hope it goes deeper than just digesting a video here and there and then kind of, digesting another one, thinking that it's really shifting things. Again, it's better to be looking at that kind of stuff than something that's really dark. But what really even makes your astrology become something that you're devoted to is the practice, is to actually, like, for example, actually learn it correctly. Actually study it. Because when you study something, you're also bringing your heart in alignment with it. Rather than it just being something separate, you bring it into your heart, and then this becomes a part of your devotional practice. Also with astrology, it's something that it's a practice. It's not a religion. So this is why astrology is such a powerful spiritual practice, because it's not a religion. You're not just believing in all of this. And if you do think it's that, then you don't really know what astrology is. And again, this is also something that happens a lot with students and with teachers and with people who will say, well, what do you do when someone doesn't believe in astrology? And my answer is, well, I don't believe in astrology. It's not a belief, it's a practice. And nobody should have to believe in it. If you can't make someone understand it because they don't believe in it, then that means you don't understand it. If you can't explain it, that means you don't understand it and you just believe it, and it's something very disconnected. So again, I invite you to study. I showed you a class I'm teaching at the beginning of the year. That'd be a great place to start. But any place. I have courses, $10 that really get people understanding that it's a practice. And you watch it every day. You track it. You see your own nature. And then it's not a religion, it's a practice. It's something that you experience and you cognize, just like you experience the weather. You don't believe in the weather. It's not a religion, it's an experience. So bridging that gap now is really important. And you should only really trust and follow and be devoted to things that you are living experientially. You shouldn't be devoted to things that you just believe in some abstract way. That in fact, not only shouldn't you be devoted to that, but ultimately you're not. The fact of the matter is, this is what makes people hypocritical, because ultimately you are only devoted to that which you live and that you've loved and experienced through the heart. The other stuff is put on top of it, these beliefs that create a lot of confusion. But those things also reveal the hypocrisy and the difference between what you believe and what you actually know and what you're actually devoted to. So bridging that gap and bringing those things together right now is really important. I hope I made that clear, that difference, because again, it's very easy to just believe things that we don't understand. And then when reality asserts itself, we come back to what we're truly devoted to, which is what we've lived and experienced. So when your lived experience is the practices and is the meditation and whatnot, then it's a great sort of marriage of those things. In this course in January, this is what we're going to be really delving into. I'm going to be really delving into that whole process because all of this takes place really in the moon, in the mind and consciousness. This is literally where your karma lives. Your karma really is the mind. People want to know, well, what's karma? Is it karmic? Is that karma? Everything is karma. Your life is based on karma, which means the actions that were taken in the past, whether it was past lives or yesterday. All of it's the past, right? And it's in your mind. That's where the karma is stored. And then you take action, you create new karma based on the actions you take, which then spirals forward. But all of the karma really is from the past, and it's all in your mind. And the birth chart, you incarnate with these tendencies. And all of that lives in the moon and consciousness. This is why the moon is so important, because and especially the main Vedic astrological dasha cycle, the Vimshotri dasha scheme, is based on the moon, because that's where the karma lands. And then the actions you take based on those tendencies, that's your consciousness and presence in this lifetime or in this moment. And it happens every moment. Every moment is a new possibility framed by the karmic frame, the karmic cycle. So the moon is the place where that lives. And this is why it's so important to be clear and understand the nature of consciousness, so you're less emotional about everything and more devotional. Because now what happens, really, if you want to know what your karma is, examine your emotions. It's that simple. How do you react to everything? That's your karma. Means that's your patterning. That's your past patterning and your current situation. And it can be easily seen in the chart that this is your karmic response. How do you people say, well, how do I stop doing those things? You have to get present. But first you have to understand what it is that you're doing. So if you want to really learn these things properly, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to break it down very systematically and scientifically. And it implicates things like our childhood and the nakshatras and devotion and, sati sati, Saturn going over the moon, all this stuff that people hear about that influence the moon, or that you hear about the moon. That's what we're going to talk about in that weekend course. So anyway, I appreciate, we have some people here. Flor Morena said it's been crystal clear to hear what I'm saying. Maggie Craggy says, Amaji. Yes, Amma is my Satguru. Flora says, I'm so happy I was able to join you live. Thank you very much for that as well. I wanted to come on and talk about these things today. It's definitely something where we're right on the cusp of a lot of shifts, right? This sun moving into Sagittarius, really preparing for next year, which right around the corner, Saturn is then going to move into Aquarius. By early next year, then Jupiter is going to move out of Pisces into Aries, which of course we'll talk about that as well. But I appreciate everyone coming today. I'm glad to have shared this with you, and you take care.
For 50 cents, you can get a 2-week trial to the Astrology Training Lab. In this, you get daily forecasts from Sam Jeppy. These are based on the Indian Panchanga, the classical Indian timekeeping system. You also get a monthly calendar from Melissa Flores Davies, where you can plan your whole month and see all the shifts. You also get 8 hours of classes just for joining, new and full moon updates from me as well. Again, it's only 50 cents for a 2-week trial, then $39.95 for as long as you want to stay a member. Just go to astrologytraininglab.com to register.